The gymnasium lights flickered as Madison Torres walked through those familiar double doors for the first time in 20 years. Behind her, two men in dark suits scanned the room with trained eyes. She'd been General Torres for the past decade, commanding respect from world leaders and managing classified operations that kept the nation safe. But tonight, she was just another face in the crowd of Lincoln High School's Class of 2004 reunion. What her former classmates didn't know was that three of them had spent weeks orchestrating the perfect plan to publicly destroy her, the same way they'd tried to break her spirit when she was 17. They had no idea they were about to face someone who'd stared down terrorists, negotiated with foreign dignitaries, and earned 4 stars through sheer determination. This wasn't high school anymore, and Madison Torres was no longer the quiet girl they used to torment. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The rental car's engine hummed quietly as Madison Torres pulled into the Marriott parking lot in downtown Phoenix. 20 years had passed since she'd last set foot in this city, but the desert heat still hit her the same way, dry and unforgiving. She adjusted the rearview mirror and caught sight of the black SUV that had been following at a respectful distance since the airport. Agent Collins and Agent Murphy were probably wondering why a 4-star general would insist on driving herself to a high school reunion, but some things required a personal touch. Madison stepped out of the car, her civilian clothes feeling strange after years of military uniforms. The simple black dress and heels were a far cry from her usual combat boots and tactical gear, but they served their purpose. Tonight, she needed to blend in at least initially. The evening air carried the scent of creosote and memories she'd worked hard to bury. Her phone buzzed with a text from her aide back at the Pentagon. "Ma'am, the Secretary of Defense moved tomorrow's briefing to 0800. Safe travels." Even here, 1,000 miles from Washington, D.C., the weight of her responsibilities followed her. As the youngest 4-star general in U.S. Army history and the first woman to head the Joint Special Operations Command, Madison's schedule was typically planned months in advance. This reunion was the first personal event she'd attended in years. The hotel lobby bustled with familiar faces, though most looked drastically different from their teenage selves. Madison recognized Jenny Walsh immediately, still perfectly manicured, still surrounded by the same circle of admirers she'd commanded in high school. Their eyes met across the crowded space, and Jenny's expression shifted from polite recognition to something resembling shock. "Madison Fletcher?" Jenny called out, using her maiden name. The surrounding group turned to stare, whispers rippling through the crowd like water. "I can't believe you actually came." Madison smiled, the same diplomatic expression she'd perfected during congressional hearings and international summits. "It's General Torres now, actually. And yes, I wouldn't miss it." The words hung in the air like a challenge. Jenny's perfectly practiced smile faltered for just a moment before returning full force. "General? How exciting. I'm sure you have some interesting stories." "A few," Madison replied, noting how the conversation had drawn the attention of nearly everyone within earshot. She recognized several faces from her nightmare years at Lincoln High. Brad Morrison, now sporting a receding hairline and expensive suit that couldn't hide his expanding waistline. Ashley Chun, whose social media presence had kept her marginally famous in Phoenix circles. And lurking near the registration table, Derek Santos, the ringleader of every cruel joke and humiliating prank that had made her junior and senior years a living hell. Derek approached with the same predatory confidence he'd wielded as quarterback of the football team. Well, Madison Fletcher graces us with her presence." His eyes swept over her dismissively. "You look different." 20 years of discipline will do that," Madison replied calmly. She'd faced down insurgents in Afghanistan and negotiated hostage releases in Somalia, but something about Derek's smirk still triggered that familiar knot in her stomach. the same feeling she'd carried every morning walking into Lincoln High's hallways. "Still playing soldier, I see," Brad chimed in, joining the growing circle. "Some people never grow out of their phase, right?" The casual cruelty in his tone was identical to the voice that had tormented her 2 decades ago. Madison had been the scholarship kid from the wrong side of Phoenix, the girl whose mother worked double shifts at the hospital, while her father served his second deployment overseas. While her classmates drove BMWs and spent spring breaks in CABO, Madison had worked part-time at a local diner and studied in the school library because home was too chaotic for homework. "I suppose some things never change," Madison agreed, her tone giving away nothing. Around them, the reunion crowd continued its animated conversations, but she could feel the undercurrent of attention focused on their group. Social dynamics from high school were reasserting themselves with stunning predictability. Ashley stepped closer, her smile razor-sharp. "You know, we were just talking about you last week. Planning something special for tonight, actually. A little trip down memory lane." The words confirmed what Madison's security detail had discovered through their preliminary reconnaissance. Agent Collins had briefed her 3 days ago. Social media chatter suggested a coordinated effort to embarrass her at the reunion. The details were vague, but the participants were clear, the same trio that had made her teenage years a study in survival. Jenny glanced toward the hotel's event coordinator, then back at Madison with barely contained excitement. "We thought it would be fun to share some old memories. You know, those precious moments that really shaped who we became." Madison understood the subtext immediately. They had something, photos, stories, or recordings from high school that they planned to weaponize. The same tactics they'd used when they were 17, just with a larger audience and social media amplification. Part of her felt that familiar teenage anxiety creeping up her spine, but it was quickly overshadowed by something else entirely: curiosity about how far they were willing to push this. "Memories can be tricky things," Madison said thoughtfully. "Sometimes what we remember isn't quite how things actually happened." Derek's laugh was harsh and familiar. "Oh, I think we remember everything perfectly. Especially that time junior year when you and I what?" Madison's voice carried just enough edge to cut through his bluster. Around them, conversations gradually quieted as more classmates sensed the tension building. The moment stretched uncomfortably, until Jenny stepped in with practiced social grace. "Well, I'm sure we'll have plenty of time to catch up properly tonight. The real fun starts at 8. As the group dispersed, Madison felt her phone vibrate with an encrypted message from Agent Collins. "Perimeter secure. 3 additional subjects of interest identified in the vicinity. Recommend maintaining current protocol." She typed back quickly. "Understood. Proceeding as planned." Madison made her way to the registration table, where a cheerful volunteer handed her a name tag and reunion booklet. Flipping through the pages, she found her senior class photo, a serious-faced 17-year-old with uncertain eyes and a forced smile. The girl in that photo had no idea she would spend the next 2 decades earning a Purple Heart in Iraq, a Bronze Star in Afghanistan, and eventually commanding some of the most elite military units in the world. The hotel's grand ballroom had been transformed with Lincoln High's colors, blue and gold streamers, photo collages from their senior year, and a DJ playing hits from 2004. Madison moved through the crowd, engaging in polite small talk with classmates who remembered her with varying degrees of accuracy. Some were genuinely pleased to see her success. Others seemed confused by the transformation from quiet scholarship student to decorated military officer. As the evening progressed, she noticed Derek, Jenny, and Ashley huddling together near the audiovisual equipment that had been set up for the night's presentations. Their body language suggested nervous excitement, the same energy they'd radiated before executing their cruelest high school pranks. Madison checked her watch. 7:45 p.m. Whatever they had planned would happen soon. At exactly 8 o'clock, the hotel's event coordinator tapped the microphone, sending feedback squealing through the ballroom speakers. Madison positioned herself near the back wall, a tactical habit that allowed her to observe the entire room while maintaining multiple exit routes. Agent Collins and Agent Murphy had taken discreet positions by the service entrances, their presence invisible to the reunion crowd, but reassuring to Madison. "Ladies and gentlemen, if I could have your attention," the coordinator announced. "We have some special presentations prepared by your classmates tonight." Jenny Walsh stepped onto the small stage with the confidence of someone who'd never doubted her place in the world. She wore a flowing red dress that probably cost more than most people's monthly salary, and her smile could have powered the hotel's lighting system. "Thank you all for being here tonight," Jenny began, her voice carrying easily across the room. 20 years ago, we walked these same halls together, shared the same experiences, and created memories that have shaped who we've become." Madison noticed Derek moving toward the projection screen that had been set up to one side of the stage. In his hands was a tablet connected to the hotel's sound system. Ashley stood near the lighting controls, her fingers hovering over various switches with the focus of a theater technician. "Some of us have traveled incredible distances to be here," Jenny continued, her eyes finding Madison in the crowd. "Some have achieved things we never could have imagined back in high school. And some ... quotes she paused for dramatic effect. Some have stories that deserve to be shared with everyone." The crowd murmured with anticipation. Madison recognized this setup, the same theatrical build-up they'd used before their most elaborate high school pranks. She remembered the junior year incident Derek had started to reference earlier, when they'd somehow obtained her private journal and projected selected pages during a school assembly. The humiliation had been devastating then. A 17-year-old's private thoughts about crushes and insecurities displayed for the entire student body. "Derek Morrison has put together something very special," Jenny announced. "A little blast from the past that I think everyone will find ... enlightening." Derek stepped forward, tablet in hand. "We all remember Madison Fletcher, right? Quiet little scholarship girl who kept to herself." His voice carried across the room with practiced cruelty. "Well, she's here tonight, and we thought it would be fun to share some memories from the good old days." Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. The projection screen flickered to life, displaying the Lincoln High School logo. Madison felt that familiar tightness in her chest, not fear, exactly, but the ghost of teenage vulnerability she'd thought she'd conquered years ago. Around her, classmates turned to locate her in the crowd, their expressions ranging from curious to uncomfortable. "You see," Ashley added, stepping into the spotlight, "some people like to reinvent themselves. They want us to forget who they really were back then." Her voice dripped with false sympathy. "But we have long memories." The screen changed to display a photo from their senior year. Madison at 17, sitting alone in the school cafeteria, looking painfully isolated. The image had been taken without her knowledge, probably with one of the early digital cameras that were just becoming popular. "Poor little Madison," Derek narrated with mock concern. "Always eating lunch by herself. Never quite fitting in with the rest of us." More photos appeared in rapid succession. Madison studying alone in the library, walking to her beat-up Honda Civic while other students climbed into luxury vehicles, working behind the counter at Danny's Diner in her unflattering uniform. Each image was accompanied by Derek's commentary, painting a picture of a pathetic, lonely teenager desperately trying to belong. Madison watched the presentation with the detached professionalism she'd developed during intelligence briefings. This was their strategy: public humiliation through selective memory, designed to reduce her accomplishments to the insecurities of a 17-year-old. The same playbook they'd used in high school, Just with better technology and a larger audience, the ballroom had grown uncomfortably quiet. Some classmates shifted nervously, recognizing the cruelty for what it was. Others watched with the same morbid fascination they'd shown during high school drama. Madison noticed several people pulling out their phones, undoubtedly recording. The spectacle for social media. But the best part, Jenny said, retaking control of the microphone, is what we found cleaning out our old lockers last month. Some things never change, do they, Madison? The screen shifted to display pages from what appeared to be a diary or journal. Madison's heart rate increased slightly as she recognized her own teenage handwriting. Somehow they'd kept copies of the journal pages they'd stolen and displayed 20 years ago. The entries detailed her crushes, her insecurities about her family's financial situation, and her desperate desire to be accepted by her classmates. "Listen to this," Ashley read. Aloud, her voice carrying clearly through the sound system. March 15, 2004. Sometimes I wonder if anyone would even notice if I didn't come to school tomorrow. Jenny and her friends make me feel invisible, like I'm not worth their time. Maybe if my dad made more money, or if we lived in the right neighborhood, things would be different. Uncomfortable murmurs rippled through the crowd. Madison recognized several classmates looking embarrassed by the display, but others seemed entertained by the drama. The social dynamics from high school were reasserting themselves with stunning clarity. Derek took over the narration. Or how? About this one, April 3, 2004, I have such a huge crush on Tyler Rodriguez, but he doesn't even know I exist. Girls like Jenny Walsh get guys like that. I'm just the weird girl who works at the diner and shops at thrift stores. Tyler Rodriguez, now a successful real estate developer, stood near the bar looking mortified. His wife, a woman Madison didn't recognize from high school, whispered something in his ear with obvious disapproval. The point is, Jenny concluded, stepping back to the microphone, people can put on all the uniforms they want, claim all the fancy titles they want, but deep down, they're still the same insecure. Little girl eating lunch alone in the cafeteria. The ballroom fell silent except for the hum of the air conditioning system. Madison felt every eye in the room focused on her, waiting for her reaction. The same expectation that had followed her through the hallways of Lincoln, high waiting. For her to break, to cry, to run away in humiliation. Instead, she began walking toward the stage. Her movement through the crowd created a ripple effect, classmates stepping aside to create a path. Madison's heels clicked against the marble floor with military precision, each step measured and purposeful. She'd learned long ago that in moments of crisis, posture and pace communicated as much as words. Agent Collins shifted slightly near the service entrance, his hand moving toward his jacket. Through their earpieces, Madison heard him whisper to his partner, subject approaching the stage, maintaining overwatch. Jenny's confident smile faltered as Madison drew closer. Derek clutched his tablet tighter, while Ashley took a small step backward from the lighting controls. The dynamics were shifting, and they could feel it. Madison reached the base of the small stage and paused, looking up at the three people who'd made her teenage years a study in survival. The moment stretched uncomfortably until she spoke, her voice carrying clearly without amplification. "Thank you for sharing those memories," she said calmly. "Though I notice you left out some important context." Without waiting for permission, Madison stepped onto the stage. Her presence immediately changed the energy in the room, the same commanding authority that had earned respect in congressional hearings and international negotiations. "You're right about one thing, Jenny. Some people don't change." Madison's eyes swept across the trio before addressing the broader audience. 20 years ago, these three individuals thought it was entertaining to steal a 17-year-old's private journal and humiliate her in front of the entire school. Tonight, they've decided to repeat that performance. Derek stepped forward. Aggressively, "Hey, we're just sharing memories here. If you can't handle, Can I borrow that? Madison gestured toward his tablet. The question sounded polite, but her tone carried the kind of authority that made Colonel snap to attention. Derek hesitated, suddenly uncertain. Madison extended her hand and waited, the same patient confidence she'd used during hostage negotiations. After a moment of uncomfortable silence, Derek reluctantly handed over the device. Madison connected the tablet to the projection system with practiced efficiency. Since we're sharing memories tonight, I thought you might be interested in some context you missed. The screen filled with official military documents, commendation letters, promotion orders, and mission reports. But Madison bypassed those in favor of something more personal, a series of newspaper clippings and photographs documenting her military service. This is from my first deployment to Iraq in 2006, she explained as an image appeared showing a much younger Madison in combat fatigues, standing beside a damaged Humvee. I was a 22-year-old second lieutenant leading a convoy security team through Fallujah. The ballroom remained absolutely silent. Madison advanced to the next image, herself receiving a Purple Heart after being wounded by an improvised explosive device. The journal entries you shared were written by a 17-year-old girl who felt powerless and alone. Madison continued. That girl joined the army not because she was running away from her problems, but because she understood that some things are worth fighting for. More images followed, Madison training with Special Forces units, briefing senior military officials, walking alongside foreign dignitaries. Each photo told a story of progression, of deliberate growth from the insecure teenager they remembered to someone who'd earned her place through competence and determination. You're right that I was lonely in high school, Madison acknowledged. You're right that I felt like an outsider. What you missed was that those experiences taught me resilience, empathy, and the value of hard work. Ashley tried to interrupt. Look, we were just having some fun. Fun? Madison's voice cut through the excuse with surgical precision. Let me tell you about fun. She advanced to a new slide showing herself in dress uniform, surrounded by other high-ranking military officials. This was taken 3 months ago during a Joint Chiefs meeting. We were discussing strategies to protect American interests in the South China Sea. The person you've been trying to humiliate tonight was representing the United States in conversations that affect global security. The contrast was stark and undeniable. Jenny, Derek, and Ashley stood frozen as their carefully planned humiliation backfired spectacularly. The audience watched in fascination as someone they'd underestimated systematically dismantled their former tormentors. Madison returned Derek's tablet and stepped to the microphone. 20 years ago, you three taught me an important lesson about power and how some people choose to use it. Tonight, you've reminded everyone in this room why character matters more than popularity. She paused, surveying the silent ballroom before delivering her final observation. The difference between us isn't our careers or our achievements. The difference is that I learned from high school. You're still living in it. The silence stretched until someone in the crowd began clapping slowly. Others joined in, the applause building until it filled the ballroom. Madison nodded to the audience, then walked off the stage with the same measured pace she'd used to approach it. As she moved through the crowd, classmates reached out to shake her hand or offer words of support. The social dynamics had shifted completely. Jenny, Derek, and Ashley stood isolated on the stage, their cruelty exposed and rejected by their former audience. Madison's phone buzzed with a message from Agent Murphy. Ma'am, we have movement outside the building. Recommend extraction protocols. She typed back quickly, negative, proceeding with the original timeline. The reunion was far from over. The atmosphere in the ballroom had completely transformed. What began as Jenny, Derek, and Ashley's carefully orchestrated humiliation had backfired so spectacularly that conversations buzzed with energy Madison hadn't felt since her high school days, except this time. She wasn't the target of whispered gossip. Tyler Rodriguez approached her first, his wife Sarah close behind. "Madison, I owe you an apology," he said, extending his hand. "Not just for tonight, but for back then. I should have spoken up when they were targeting you." His words carried genuine remorse. Madison remembered Tyler as one of the few popular kids who'd never actively participated in the cruelty, but his silence had been complicity nonetheless. "We all made choices back then," Madison replied diplomatically. "What matters is who we chose to become afterward." Sarah Rodriguez squeezed her husband's arm. "Tyler told me stories about high school, but I never realized how bad it was for some students. What they just tried to do to you was inexcusable." Around them, other classmates gathered in small groups, their conversations animated with the kind of social recalibration that happens when established hierarchies suddenly shift. Madison noticed several people filming the aftermath with their phones. The story would be all over social media within hours. Near the stage, Jenny huddled with Derek and Ashley, their faces flushed with embarrassment and anger. They'd expected tears, humiliation, maybe Madison fleeing the reunion in shame. Instead, they'd been publicly exposed as adults still clinging to high school cruelties. Dr. Patricia Hawkins, their former English teacher who'd attended as an honored guest, made her way through the crowd toward Madison. At 72, Mrs. Hawkins moved with the careful dignity of someone who'd spent 5 decades shaping young minds. "Miss Fletcher, excuse me, General Torres," she corrected herself with a warm smile. "I always knew you were destined for great things. You had that quiet determination that comes from genuine strength." Madison remembered Dr. Hawkins as one of the few teachers who'd recognize her potential beyond her economic circumstances. "You were one of the reasons I kept going, Mrs. Hawkins. Your American literature class was my sanctuary." "I still have your essay on The Great Gatsby," the elderly teacher revealed. "You wrote about how social class creates artificial barriers, but individual character transcends them." Prophetic, really. Their conversation was interrupted by commotion near the registration table. Derek had apparently decided that retreat was his best option and was making an aggressive exit, pushing through clusters of classmates with barely contained fury. "This is ridiculous," he announced loudly enough for half the room to hear. "She acts like she's some kind of war hero, but we all know she's still the same pathetic girl who couldn't afford decent clothes." The ballroom fell silent again. Madison felt the familiar tightness in her chest, not from Derek's words, but from the recognition that some people never evolve beyond their teenage selves. "Agent," Collins's voice crackled through her nearly invisible earpiece. "Ma'am, subject Derek Morrison appears agitated. Should we intervene?" Madison touched her ear briefly, the signal for negative, and walked toward Derek with the same measured confidence she'd displayed all evening. "You're absolutely right, Derek," she said, her voice carrying clearly across the silent ballroom. "I am still that girl who couldn't afford designer clothes." Derek stopped mid-stride, apparently not expecting agreement. "I'm still the girl whose mother worked double shifts to keep food on the table," Madison continued. "Still the girl who wore thrift store clothes and worked weekends to help pay bills. Still the girl who felt like an outsider in her own high school." She paused directly in front of Derek, close enough that their conversation couldn't be overheard, but positioned so the entire room could observe their body language. "The difference is, I'm proud of that girl now. She taught me that worth isn't measured by your parents' bank account or your zip code. She taught me that dignity comes from how you treat others, especially when you have power over them." Derek's face reddened. "You think you're better than us now? You think that uniform makes you special?" "No," Madison replied calmly. "I think 20 years of growth makes me different. You're standing in front of 200 people acting exactly the way you did when you were 17. That's what makes me sad for you." The exchange might have escalated further, but Ashley suddenly appeared at Derek's side, whispering urgently in his ear, Whatever she told him made his expression shift from anger to something approaching panic. Madison's phone buzzed with a priority message from Agent Murphy. "Ma'am, 3 black SUVs just arrived. Additional security detail deploying around the perimeter." She glanced toward the ballroom entrance and spotted Agent Collins speaking quietly into his wrist microphone. This wasn't part of their standard security protocol. Something had changed. Dr. Hawkins noticed the subtle shift in Madison's demeanor. "Is everything all right, dear?" "Excuse me for just a moment," Madison replied, stepping away from the crowd toward a quieter corner of the ballroom. She pulled out her encrypted phone and speed-dialed her aide at the Pentagon. "General Torres." Came the immediate response. "Ma'am, we've had a development. Intelligence indicates a potential security threat tied to your current location. The Secretary of Defense authorized additional protective measures." Madison's training kicked in automatically. Nature of the threat: still being assessed, but it appears someone leaked your location and current operational status to unauthorized. Parties: could be foreign intelligence, could be domestic threats. We're treating it as credible until proven otherwise. She surveyed the ballroom with new eyes, noting exit routes and potential cover positions. The reunion crowd continued their animated conversations, oblivious to the security apparatus now surrounding the hotel. "Understood. What's the recommendation?" "Immediate extraction, ma'am. We have assets in position." Madison considered her options. 20 years ago, she would have fled at the first sign of trouble. The same instinct, Derek, Jenny, and Ashley were probably expecting tonight. But running away wasn't who she'd become. Negative, she decided. Maintain a security perimeter. But I'm staying for the scheduled duration. "Ma'am, with respect, that's an order, Lieutenant Colonel Martinez. These people spent 2 decades waiting to see me break and run. That's not happening tonight." She ended the call and returned to the reunion crowd, where conversations had shifted toward career updates and family stories. Several classmates approached her with genuine curiosity about military life, asking thoughtful questions about her service and experiences overseas. Marcus Thompson, who'd been student body president their senior year, joined the growing circle. Around Madison: "I have to ask, what's it like commanding troops in combat? That's incredible pressure." Madison appreciated his genuine interest. "The hardest part isn't making strategic decisions under fire. It's knowing that every choice you make affects real people with families and dreams. You carry that responsibility long after the mission ends." "Do you ever get scared?" asked Lisa Chun, Ashley's older sister who'd graduated 2 years ahead of them. "Every day," Madison admitted honestly. "Fear keeps you alert, keeps you making smart decisions. The difference between courage and stupidity is learning to function effectively despite being afraid." Near the bar, she noticed Jenny Walsh in intense conversation with a man Madison didn't recognize, well-dressed, probably mid-40s, with the kind of aggressive body language that suggested he was used to getting his way. Agent Collins appeared at Madison's elbow with the subtle presence that marked elite protective details. To casual observers, he looked like another reunion attendee, but his positioning and alertness marked him as professional security. "Ma'am," he said quietly, "we've identified the individual speaking with Ms. Walsh, Richard Blackwood, investigative, journalist with a reputation for ambush interviews. He arrived approximately 10 minutes ago." Madison followed his gaze toward Jenny and the journalist. Their body language suggested conspiracy heads together, occasional glances in her direction. The kind of animated planning that preceded tabloid exposes. "Let me guess," Madison said. "Jenny called in reinforcements." "Appears so, Mom. Mr. Blackwood specializes in military scandals and government cover-ups. His editor received an anonymous tip about a high-ranking military officer with questionable background attending a civilian event." Madison felt a familiar surge of adrenaline, not fear, but the sharp focus that came before engaging a hostile situation. Jenny hadn't given up after her public humiliation. She'd escalated to bringing in outside ammunition. What's his angle? She asked Agent Collins. Unknown, but he's been recording conversations for the past few minutes. Appears to be building a narrative about military officers using taxpayer-funded security details for personal events. The accusation was technically accurate. Madison's security detail was indeed funded by defense appropriations, but the implication that she was abusing her position was completely false. Her protection level had been mandated by the Department of Defense after specific intelligence threats, not requested for personal convenience. Richard Blackwood approached their group with the confident swagger of someone who'd ambushed plenty of targets before. His phone was clearly recording as he introduced himself to the circle of classmates. Good evening, everyone. Richard Blackwood, investigative journalist. I understand we have a distinguished military officer in attendance tonight. The question was directed at the group, but his eyes locked onto Madison with predatory focus. Several classmates shifted uncomfortably, recognizing the shift in atmosphere. General Torres, Blackwood continued, I'm hoping you might answer a few questions about the appropriateness of using federal security resources for personal social events. Madison recognized the trap immediately. Any defensive response would be edited to sound guilty, while refusing to answer would be portrayed as arrogance or hiding something. She'd seen this playbook used against other military leaders. Dr. Hawkins stepped forward with the protective instinct of a teacher defending her students. Young man, this is a private event. If you're not a Lincoln High School graduate, you need to leave. Blackwood smiled with practiced charm. Actually, ma'am, I'm here as a guest of Jennifer Walsh. She's concerned about the potential misuse of military resources and wanted to ensure proper accountability. The ballroom crowd began. Noticing the confrontation, conversations quieting as attention focused on the developing drama. Madison realized this was exactly what Jenny had planned. If the personal humiliation failed, she'd escalate to professional destruction. Agent Murphy appeared on Madison's other side, his presence creating a subtle protective barrier. Sir, you'll need to cease recording and leave the premises immediately. Blackwood held up his press credentials. I have a right to be here as an invited guest, and I have a right to ask questions about government accountability. Not tonight, you don't, came a new voice from the ballroom entrance. Everyone turned to see a woman in a dark suit walking purposefully across the marble floor. Madison recognized her immediately. Deputy Director Sarah Chun from the Department of Defense Office of Inspector General, someone she'd worked with during congressional testimony preparation. Mr. Blackwood, Deputy Director Chun announced as she approached, you're interfering with an active security operation. I'm going to need you to surrender your recording device and exit the building. Blackwood's confident expression faltered. I don't understand. This is just a high school reunion. No, sir, it's not. General Torres is currently under enhanced protection due to credible intelligence threats. Your presence here, regardless of who invited you, constitutes a potential security breach. Madison watched Jenny's face drain of color as she realized her plan had backfired catastrophically. What she'd intended as professional sabotage had inadvertently revealed the serious nature of the security situation. Deputy Director Chun gestured toward two additional agents who'd entered behind her. Gentlemen, please escort Mr. Blackwood from the premises and confiscate his recording equipment, pending security review. As Blackwood was led away, protesting about press freedom and government overreach, the ballroom crowd buzzed with excited speculation. The reunion had transformed from nostalgic socializing to high-stakes drama, worthy of a thriller movie. Madison found herself at the center of a circle of classmates whose expressions ranged from awe to concern to barely contained excitement about being part of something obviously significant. Madison, Dr. Hawkins said quietly, are you in some kind of danger? Nothing I can't handle, Madison replied. though the security escalation suggested otherwise. Sometimes military leadership comes with occupational hazards. Agent Collins touched his earpiece, then leaned close to Madison. "Ma'am, we're getting additional intelligence. Recommend moving to a secure location within the next 30 minutes. Madison nodded, then addressed the crowd that had gathered around her. "I'm afraid I need to wrap up my evening a bit early. Thank you all for the warm welcome. It's been enlightening to reconnect with everyone." As she prepared to leave Tyler, Rodriguez raised his voice above the crowd noise. "Before you go, Madison, I think I speak for everyone when I say we're proud to have you as a classmate. What happened tonight with Jenny and Derek was inexcusable, and I'm sorry it took us 20 years to stand up and say that." Spontaneous applause broke out across the ballroom, genuine and sustained. Madison felt an unexpected wave of emotion, not the vulnerability she'd experienced as a teenager, but the satisfaction of hard-won respect from people whose opinions had once seemed so important. Jenny Walsh stood near the registration table, isolated and visibly shaken by how completely her evening had unraveled. Derek had already fled, and Ashley lurked near the exit looking like she wanted to disappear entirely. Madison walked over to Jenny, trailed by her security detail and observed by the entire reunion crowd. "Thank you," she said simply. Jenny looked confused. "For what?" "For reminding me why I left Phoenix in the first place," Madison replied. "And for showing everyone here exactly who you chose to remain." She turned and walked toward the exit, her heels clicking against the marble with military precision, flanked by federal agents, and followed by the respectful gaze of 200 classmates who finally understood what they'd missed 20 years ago. The hotel lobby transformed into a command center within minutes of Madison's departure from the ballroom. Agent Collins coordinated with local law enforcement, while Agent Murphy established communication protocols with the newly arrived federal team. Madison observed the organized chaos from a secure conference room on the hotel's second floor, watching her former classmates through floor-to-ceiling windows as they spilled onto the sidewalk below. Deputy Director Chun spread classified intelligence reports across the conference table. "Generally, the situation is more complex than we initially assessed. The leak about your location came from someone with access to your personal schedule, not just your official military calendar." Madison studied the documents with growing concern. Her reunion attendance had been a personal decision, coordinated through her aide, but not officially reported through military channels. Someone with intimate knowledge of her private activities had deliberately exposed her location. "How many people knew about tonight?" Chun asked. "Fewer than a dozen," Madison replied, mentally cataloging the possibilities. "My aide, my driver, my personal assistant, and a few family members, plus anyone at the reunion planning committee who had access to the guest list." Agent Collins joined them from his coordination efforts downstairs. "Ma'am, we've secured the perimeter, but there's another complication." Ms. Walsh posted live updates about tonight's events to her social media accounts throughout the evening. "Your confrontation with the bullies, the journalist's arrival, and our security response have been documented in real time." Madison's phone buzzed with notifications as her social media mentions exploded exponentially. The hashtag Reunion General was already trending, with video clips of her speech spreading across multiple platforms. "Show me," she requested. Agent Collins connected his tablet to the room's display screen. Jenny's Instagram story played out like a documentary of the evening's events, each post more inflammatory than the last. The early video showed Madison's arrival with subtle mockery about little Madison trying to look important. Later posts grew increasingly frantic as Jenny's humiliation backfired. But the final post, uploaded just minutes ago, revealed Jenny's true desperation. "Military cover-up in progress. They're trying to silence anyone who questions their precious general. Hashtag truth matters, hashtag government accountability. She's created a conspiracy narrative, Deputy Director Ching observed. Your security response is being portrayed as authoritarian. Overreach rather than legitimate protection protocols. Madison scrolled through the comments, watching public opinion fragments in real time. Military supporters praised her composure and service record, while others questioned why taxpayers funded security for personal events. Conspiracy theorists latched onto Jenny's narrative about government cover-ups and silenced journalists. The story's going national, Agent Murphy reported from his laptop. 3 major news networks have already picked up the video clips. Fox News is running a segment about military accountability, while CNN is focusing on the bullying angle. Madison recognized the media dynamics at play. The story contained every element guaranteed to generate clicks and controversy: military leadership, high school drama, federal security, and allegations of government overreach. Within hours, she'd be fielding calls from congressional oversight committees. Her secure phone rang with a call from the Pentagon. General Torres, came the familiar voice of Secretary of Defense Williams. I'm watching this situation develop on social media. What's your assessment? Madison moved to the window, observing the crowd of reunion attendees still gathered outside the hotel. Several were filming themselves giving interviews to local news crews that had arrived within the past 30 minutes. Sir, this appears to be a coordinated attack on my credibility, escalating from personal harassment to professional sabotage. The individuals involved have weaponized social media to create a false narrative about security protocol abuse. I've seen the videos, General. Your conduct appears exemplary under the circumstances. However, the optics are challenging. Opposition politicians are already calling for investigations into military spending on personal protection. Madison understood the subtext. Her promotion to 4-star general had been controversial enough without adding fuel to existing political fires about military leadership and accountability. What are your orders, sir? Full transparency, General. We're going to get ahead of this story rather than let it fester. You'll testify before the Armed Services Committee next week about security protocols and their appropriate application. Turn this into a teaching moment about the realities of military leadership in the 5G digital age. The call ended, leaving Madison with the sobering realization that Jenny's high school vendetta had achieved its ultimate goal, dragging her military career into public controversy. Deputy Director Chin reviewed additional intelligence reports that had arrived during the call. General, we've identified the source of the leak. It came from someone within the reunion planning committee who had access to confirmed attendee lists. Who? Madison asked, though she suspected she already knew the answer. Ashley Chun, no relation to me, the deputy director clarified. She works as an administrative assistant for a defense contractor with security clearance for personnel records. She used her access to verify your military status and current assignment, then shared that information with Ms. Walsh and the journalist. Madison felt a familiar surge of anger, quickly controlled through years of military discipline. Ashley's betrayal went beyond high school pettiness. She'd potentially compromised national security to settle a personal grudge. That's a federal crime, Agent Collins observed. Multiple federal crimes, Deputy Director Chun corrected. Unauthorized access to classified personnel records, conspiracy to compromise military security, and potentially espionage depending on her motivations. Madison's phone rang again, this time with a call from an unknown number. Against protocol, she answered. General Torres? This is Rebecca Martinez from Channel 12 News. I'm standing outside your hotel and wondering if you'd like to comment on Tions that you've abused military resources for personal vendetta against former classmates. Madison ended the call without responding, but the implications were clear. The narrative was being shaped by people who hadn't witnessed the evening's events. Based on information from sources with obvious ulterior motives, Agent Murphy approached with his laptop. "Ma'am, you need to see this. Ms. Walsh just posted a new video, claiming you threatened her with military retaliation for exposing your true character." The video showed Jenny in her hotel room, makeup smeared from crying, delivering an emotional appeal about being intimidated by federal agents for simply sharing memories with old friends. She's claiming you used your military position to silence criticism and avoid accountability for past behavior. Agent Murphy continued. The video has already been shared over 10,000 times. Madison watched her former classmate's performance with professional detachment. Jenny had transformed herself from perpetrator to victim, casting Madison as an authoritarian figure abusing government power to settle personal scores. Textbook disinformation campaign, Deputy Director Chun analyzed. Create emotional content that appeals to existing political narratives, then amplify through social media algorithms designed to prioritize engagement over accuracy. The hotel room's secure phone rang with another call from the Pentagon. This time it was Lieutenant Colonel Martinez, Madison's aide. "Ma'am, the situation here is escalating rapidly. Congressional offices are demanding immediate briefings, and the Media Relations Department is overwhelmed with interview requests. The Secretary wants you back in Washington first thing tomorrow morning." Madison looked out at the Phoenix skyline, the city lights stretching toward mountains that had surrounded her childhood. 20 years ago, she'd left this place feeling defeated and worthless. Tonight, she was being forced to leave again, but this time as collateral damage in a battle she'd never wanted to fight. "Understood, Colonel. Coordinate with my security. Detail for immediate departure." As she prepared to leave, Agent Collins received an update through his earpiece. "Ma'am, we have a problem. Mr. Morrison and Miss Chun have been detained by local law enforcement outside Ms. Walsh's hotel room. Apparently, they were attempting to coordinate their stories for media interviews." The situation was spiraling beyond personal vendetta into genuine criminal conspiracy. Derek and Ashley's involvement suggested premeditation rather than spontaneous revenge. They'd planned tonight's humiliation campaign with the specific goal of damaging Madison's military career. Deputy Director Chun gathered her classified materials. "General, I'll be recommending immediate prosecution for Miss Chun's security violations. Her actions represent a direct threat to military personnel safety and operational security." Madison nodded, but felt no satisfaction in the prospect of her former classmates facing federal charges. The entire situation highlighted how personal grievances could escalate into national security issues in the digital age. Her phone buzzed with a text message from Dr. Hawkins. "Dear, I wanted you to know that several of us are organizing a response to the false narratives being spread about tonight. You've always been a person of character, and we won't let bullies rewrite history." The message was followed by similar texts from Tyler Rodriguez, Marcus Thompson, and a dozen other classmates who'd witnessed the evening's events firsthand. While Jenny, Derek, and Ashley spun conspiracy theories on social media, their former classmates were mobilizing to defend someone they'd failed to protect 20 years ago. Agent Murphy opened the secure conference room door. "Ma'am, your transportation is ready. We'll have you airborne within the hour." Madison took one last look through the window at the city where she'd grown up feeling powerless and invisible. Tomorrow she'd face congressional questioning about her conduct and decision-making. Next week, she'd testify about military security protocols under intense political scrutiny. But tonight had also revealed something unexpected. She'd finally found the acceptance and respect from her peers that had seemed so impossible as a teenager. The people whose opinions had once seemed so important now recognized her true character, even as her former tormentors continued their desperate attempts at destruction. That as she gathered her belongings, Madison reflected on the strange trajectory that had brought her from that lonely cafeteria table to commanding some of the nation's most elite military units. Every challenge, every humiliation, every moment of doubt had contributed to the resilience that now allowed her to face congressional oversight without fear. The federal agents escorted her through the hotel's service corridors to avoid the media circus outside. As they reached the armored vehicle that would transport her to the airport, Agent Collins spoke quietly. "Ma'am, for what it's worth, your conduct tonight was exemplary. You handled a hostile situation with dignity and professionalism. That's the story the American people should hear." Madison settled into the vehicle's reinforced passenger compartment as Phoenix lights blurred past the bulletproof windows. Her phone continued buzzing with media requests, congressional inquiries, and messages of support from military colleagues who'd seen the social media coverage. The reunion she'd attended to confront old demons had evolved into a national controversy that would define the next phase of her career. Jenny Walsh's high school vendetta had achieved its ultimate goal, forcing Madison back into a defensive position where she'd have to justify her worthiness for public trust. But as the vehicle accelerated toward the airport, Madison felt the same determination that had carried her through combat deployments and congressional hearings. She'd spent 20 years proving herself through service and sacrifice. She wasn't about to let teenage bullies, armed with social media and federal crimes, destroy what she'd built through honor and integrity. The real battle was just beginning. Pentagon's corridors hummed with pre-dawn activity as Madison arrived at 0500 hours, 3 hours earlier than her scheduled briefing. Sleep had been impossible during the flight from Phoenix, her mind processing the strategic implications of what had transformed from a personal confrontation into a national security crisis. Lieutenant Colonel Martinez waited in her outer office with a stack of briefing materials and a grim expression. "Ma'am, the overnight developments have been significant." The story went international around 0200 hours. BBC, Reuters, and Al Jazeera all picked up the narrative about American military leadership and accountability. Madison accepted the coffee her aide offered and reviewed the overnight intelligence summaries. Foreign media outlets were framing the reunion incident as evidence of American military arrogance and domestic political dysfunction. Russian and Chinese state media had already amplified Jenny Walsh's conspiracy theories about government cover-ups and military authoritarianism. "What's the Pentagon's official position?" Madison asked. "Secretary Williams is holding a press conference at 0800 hours to address media speculation and confirm that all security protocols followed established procedures. The chairman of the Joint Chiefs wants to meet with you before your congressional testimony." Madison's secure computer displayed 47 urgent messages from various military commands, congressional offices, and media outlets. The situation had evolved beyond personal vindication into a test of military credibility and democratic oversight. Her personal phone, still buzzing with notifications despite being silent, showed hundreds of social media mentions. The hashtag #The Reunion General hashtag had generated over 2 million posts overnight, creating a cultural phenomenon that transcended the original incident. "Show me the worst," Madison requested. Lieutenant Colonel Martinez pulled up a compilation of hostile media coverage. Jenny Walsh had appeared on 3 morning shows, each interview more inflammatory than the last. She'd refined her narrative into a compelling story about a vindictive military officer, using federal resources to silence critics and intimidate civilians. "She's claiming you threatened her with criminal prosecution unless she deleted her social media posts," Martinez explained. "The allegation is that you abused your military authority to avoid accountability for aggressive behavior." Madison watched Jenny's performance with professional detachment. Her former classmate had discovered a talent for media manipulation, transforming crocodile tears and half-truths into a sympathetic victim narrative that resonated with existing political grievances. "What about supportive coverage?" Military Times published an editorial defending your conduct, and several veterans organizations have issued statements of support. However, The mainstream narrative is focusing on questions about military accountability rather than the harassment you experienced. The irony wasn't lost on Madison. She was being held accountable for defending herself against the same people who'd escaped consequences for 20 years of bullying behavior. Her office intercom announced the arrival of General Patricia Hayes, chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. Madison had worked with Hayes during several classified operations and respected her strategic thinking and political acumen. General Torres, Hayes began without preamble. We need to discuss damage control. This situation has implications beyond your personal career. It's being used to question military leadership competency and resource allocation. Madison gestured for Hayes to take a seat while Martinez discreetly left the office. The conversation would require absolute candor about political realities and strategic options. What's the assessment from congressional liaison? Madison asked, mixed but concerning. Republican members are using this to question defense spending on personal protection, while Democrats are focusing on potential abuse of authority. Both sides see political advantage in making you a symbol of broader issues. Hayes spread intelligence briefings across Madison's desk. The foreign intelligence angle is particularly troubling. Several hostile nations are amplifying the conspiracy. Theories about military cover-ups and authoritarian behavior. Your former classmates have inadvertently provided propaganda material for adversaries. Madison studied the reports showing how her high school reunion had become a tool for foreign disinformation campaigns. Russian bots were sharing Jenny's videos with captions about American military corruption, while Chinese social media accounts used the incident to criticize democratic institutions. Recommendations? Madison asked. Full transparency, controlled narrative, and decisive action. We're going to make you the face of military accountability rather than let others define the story. Your congressional testimony will be broadcast live, and we're arranging controlled media interviews to establish facts versus speculation. The strategy made sense from an institutional perspective, but Madison understood the personal cost. She'd become a public figure whose every decision would be scrutinized through the lens of this incident. Her secure phone rang with a call from Deputy Director Chun at the Inspector General's office. General Torres, we've completed our preliminary investigation into Ms. Chin's security violations. The evidence is overwhelming. She accessed classified personnel databases specifically to obtain information about your assignment and protection. Protocols. Legal consequences. Federal prosecutors are preparing charges for multiple violations of the Espionage Act, unauthorized access to classified information, and conspiracy to compromise military security. Ms. Chen is facing decades in federal prison. Madison felt no satisfaction in Ashley's impending prosecution. The entire situation highlighted how personal grievances could escalate into national security threats when combined with social media amplification and political exploitation. Lieutenant Colonel Martinez returned with urgent updates from the Pentagon's Media Relations Department. Ma'am, 3 major news networks want live interviews this afternoon, and congressional staff are requesting additional documentation about your security detail protocols. Schedule the interviews, Madison decided. But I want complete control over the narrative and fact-checking support for any claims made about military procedures. Her computer chimed with a priority message from Tyler Rodriguez in Phoenix. He'd organized their former classmates into an informal committee dedicated to countering Jenny's false narratives with eyewitness testimony and character references. Madison. His message read, "We've documented everything that happened at the reunion, including videos that contradict the lies being spread. Dr. Hawkins is coordinating with other teachers who remember your character from high school. We failed to stand up for you 20 years ago, but we're not failing now." The support was unexpected and deeply meaningful, but Madison recognized that civilian testimony would carry limited weight against professionally crafted media narratives and political exploitation. Her morning briefing from the intelligence community revealed the global scope of the situation. Foreign adversaries were using the reunion incident to question American military credibility and democratic institutions. Every interview, every congressional hearing, every social media post would be analyzed by hostile intelligence services for propaganda opportunities. General Hayes reviewed the strategic communications plan that had been developed overnight. We're treating this as an information warfare campaign because that's exactly what it's become. Your former classmates may have started with personal motivations, but state actors are now exploiting the situation for geopolitical advantage. Madison studied the communication strategy, recognizing the careful balance required between defending her reputation and protecting classified information about military security protocols. The key message, Hayes continued, is that American military leaders face threats that require protective measures, and those measures are applied according to established protocols rather than personal preferences. Your conduct demonstrated professionalism under hostile circumstances. At 08:00 hours, Madison watched Secretary Williams's press conference from her office. He delivered a measured defense of military security procedures while acknowledging legitimate questions about accountability and transparency. General Torres followed established protocols for threat assessment and personal protection, Williams stated. The suggestion that she abused her authority for personal vendetta is contradicted by documented evidence and eyewitness testimony. The press conference generated immediate pushback from journalists who'd been influenced by Jenny's narrative. Questions focused on why taxpayers funded security for personal events and whether military officers received preferential treatment. Unavailable to civilians, Madison's phone buzzed with a call from her mother in Colorado. "Honey, I've been watching the news coverage. Are you all right?" The concern in her mother's voice reminded Madison of the personal cost of public controversy. Her family would face scrutiny and potential harassment because of her high-profile position and the media attention surrounding the reunion incident. "I'm fine, Mom. This will pass, but it might get worse before it gets better. I'm proud of you," her mother said firmly. "You've always stood up for what's right, even when it was difficult. Don't let those bullies win now." The conversation reinforced Madison's resolve to fight back against false narratives rather than accepting victimization for the sake of political expedience. Lieutenant Colonel Martinez announced the arrival of Madison's legal counsel from the Pentagon's General Counsel Office. The afternoon would be spent preparing for congressional testimony that could define her career and influence military policies for years to come. "General Torres," the attorney began, "we need to discuss the scope of your testimony and potential legal vulnerabilities. Congressional questioning will be intense, and your responses will be scrutinized for any perceived inconsistencies." Madison reviewed the prepared testimony that had been drafted by Pentagon communications specialists. The document struck a balance between defending her conduct and acknowledging the legitimate oversight role of Congress in military affairs. "I want to add a personal statement," she decided. "The American people deserve to understand what actually happened, not the distorted version being promoted by people with ulterior motives." The legal team spent hours refining Madison's testimony to ensure accuracy while avoiding classified information that could compromise ongoing operations. Every word would be analyzed by hostile intelligence services and political opponents looking for weaknesses to exploit. As afternoon approached, Madison prepared for the media interviews that would shape public perception before her congressional appearance. The stakes extended beyond her personal reputation to encompass military credibility and democratic institutions. Her secure computer displayed real-time social media analytics showing the continued spread of conspiracy theories and foreign disinformation. The reunion incident had become a case study in how personal conflicts could be weaponized for geopolitical advantage in the digital age. Agent Collins arrived to coordinate security for the afternoon interviews, reminding Madison that the threats that had triggered enhanced protection remained active despite the media focus on alleged protocol violations. "Ma'am, we've identified additional hostile interest in your movements and statements. Foreign intelligence services are monitoring your public appearances for operational intelligence and propaganda opportunities." The sobering reminder highlighted the complex reality of military leadership in an interconnected world where personal attacks could compromise national security interests. Madison stood at her office window, overlooking the Potomac River and the monuments that symbolized American democratic values. 24 hours ago, she'd been defending herself against high school bullies at a reunion. Now she was preparing to defend military institutions against political exploitation and foreign manipulation, but the transformation from personal confrontation to national security crisis exemplified the challenges facing military leaders in the social media age. Every decision, every response, every moment of vulnerability could be exploited by adversaries seeking to undermine American strength and credibility. But Madison had faced worse odds in combat zones and congressional hearings. She'd built her career on competence, integrity, and service to something larger than personal interest. Those principles would guide her through the coming storm, regardless of the personal cost. The real test of her character wasn't surviving high school bullying. It was maintaining her values while defending American military institutions against coordinated attack from multiple directions. The battle for truth had only just begun. The Senate Armed Services Committee hearing room fell silent as Madison Torres raised her right hand to be sworn in. C-SPAN cameras captured every angle while packed galleries held journalists, military personnel, and civilians who'd followed the controversy from its viral social media origins to this moment of institutional accountability. Senator Catherine Brennan, the committee chairwoman, called the hearing to order with unusual solemnity. "General Torres, this committee has convened to examine questions about military security protocols, resource allocation, and professional conduct that have emerged from recent events in Phoenix, Arizona." Madison sat at the witness table in her dress uniform, 4 stars gleaming under the television lights. Behind her, Agent Collins and Agent Murphy maintained their protective positions despite the Senate's secure environment. The threats that had triggered enhanced security remained active regardless of congressional oversight. "General Torres," Senator Brennan continued, "please provide your account of the events that occurred during your high school reunion, focusing specifically on security decisions and protocols that have generated public concern." Madison leaned toward the microphone with the same composed confidence she'd displayed throughout her military career. "Chairwoman Brennan, thank you for the opportunity to address these important questions about military security and accountability." She opened the prepared statement that had been refined through hours of legal review and strategic consultation. "On the evening of September 8th, I attended my 20-year high school reunion as a private citizen. My security detail was present. Based on ongoing threat assessments that are unrelated to the reunion itself." Senator James Crawford, the ranking Republican member, interrupted with obvious skepticism. "General, isn't it convenient that enhanced security just happened to be in place when you faced personal embarrassment from former classmates?" Madison had anticipated this line of questioning. "Senator Crawford, the timing was entirely coincidental. Enhanced protection protocols were implemented 3 weeks prior, based on classified intelligence threats that I cannot discuss in this setting. But taxpayers are funding security for personal social events," Crawford pressed. "How do you justify that expense?" "Senator, with respect, that characterization misrepresents both the threat environment and security protocols. Military personnel don't forfeit protection requirements when attending personal events. The alternative would be restricting our movements to official duties only, which would compromise both personal liberty and operational effectiveness." Senator Maria Vasquez, a Democrat from California, took a different approach. General Torres, we've seen social media videos showing your confrontation with former classmates. Can you describe what led to that situation? Madison chose her words carefully, aware that every response would be analyzed for political implications. Senator Vasquez, 3 individuals attempted to publicly humiliate me using personal information from 20 years ago. When I responded with dignity and facts about my military service, they escalated to bringing in a journalist with false accusations about protocol violations. Were you threatened by these individuals? Not physically, Senator, but they engaged in coordinated harassment designed to damage my professional reputation. When their initial tactics failed, they brought in external parties to create false narratives about military conduct. Senator Crawford returned to his aggressive questioning. General, don't you think your response was disproportionate? Federal agents detain civilians for what amounts to high school drama. Madison felt the familiar surge of controlled anger that had served her well during combat operations. Senator, with respect, reducing this to high school drama minimizes the serious security implications. One of the individuals involved used classified database access to obtain information about my assignment and protection details, which constitutes a federal crime with national security ramifications. The hearing room buzzed with murmurs as Madison revealed classified information that had been declassified specifically for congressional testimony. Senator Crawford's expression shifted from aggressive skepticism to genuine concern. Are you suggesting espionage was involved? I'm stating that Ashley Chun, a defense contractor employee with security clearance, illegally accessed classified personnel records to obtain information about my military assignment, current operations, and protection protocols. She then shared that information with hostile parties for personal revenge. Senator Brennan leaned forward with obvious interest. General, can you elaborate on the national security implications of this breach? Madison referenced the classified briefing materials that had been prepared for congressional review. Chairwoman Brennan, hostile foreign intelligence services monitor American military personnel for operational intelligence and propaganda opportunities. Ms. Chun's actions provided sensitive information about protection protocols and current assignments that could compromise ongoing operations. The hearing room's atmosphere had shifted dramatically. What began as questioning about personal conduct had evolved into examination of genuine security threats and foreign intelligence concerns. Senator Vasquez addressed the broader implications. General Torres, how has this incident affected military operations and international perceptions? Senator, foreign adversaries have exploited the false narratives created by my former classmates to question American military credibility and democratic institutions. Russian and Chinese state media are using distorted versions of these events for propaganda purposes, claiming they demonstrate military corruption and authoritarian behavior. Madison displayed declassified intelligence reports showing how the reunion incident had been amplified by foreign disinformation campaigns. The committee members reviewed documents demonstrating coordinated efforts to weaponize personal conflicts for geopolitical advantage. Senator Crawford, now clearly uncomfortable with his earlier aggressive stance, attempted to redirect. General, regardless of foreign exploitation, shouldn't military leaders be held to higher standards of personal conduct? Absolutely, Senator. Which is why I'm proud of my conduct throughout this incident. I faced coordinated harassment with dignity, responded to false accusations with facts, and maintained professionalism despite personal attacks. The question isn't whether I met appropriate standards, it's why 3 civilians felt entitled to use federal crimes and foreign disinformation to pursue personal vendettas. Senator Brennan called for a brief recess to review the classified materials Madison had referenced. During the break, journalists frantically researched the international implications, while congressional staff coordinated with intelligence agencies about what information could be disclosed publicly. When the hearing resumed, the tone had changed completely. Senator Crawford began with a markedly different approach. General Torres, I want to apologize for my earlier characterization of these events as personal drama. The evidence clearly shows criminal activity with national security implications that goes far beyond high school rivalries. Madison acknowledged his statement professionally. Senator Crawford, I appreciate your reconsideration. Military leaders face complex threat environments that require protective measures, and those measures shouldn't be compromised by personal conflicts or political exploitation. Senator Vasquez addressed the broader policy implications. General, what recommendations do you have for protecting military personnel from this type of coordinated attack? Senator, we need stronger penalties for unauthorized access to classified information, better education about social media exploitation by foreign adversaries, and clear protocols for addressing disinformation campaigns that target military leadership. The hearing continued for 3 more hours, covering everything from security protocol evolution to the psychological warfare implications of weaponized social media. Madison's testimony transformed the narrative from personal accountability to institutional protection against hybrid threats. During the final round of questioning, Senator Brennan addressed the resolution of the incident. General Torres, what has happened to the individuals responsible for the security breaches and false narratives? Chairwoman Brennan, Ashley Chun has been charged with multiple federal crimes related to unauthorized access to classified information and conspiracy to compromise military security. Jennifer Walsh and Derek Morrison are being investigated for their roles in the coordinated harassment campaign. The journalist Richard Blackwood is under review for potential violations of national security reporting protocols. And what about the broader lessons from this incident? Madison considered her response carefully, aware that her words would influence military policy and public understanding of contemporary security challenges. Senator, this incident demonstrates how personal conflicts can be weaponized for foreign intelligence purposes in the digital age. Military leaders must be protected not just from physical threats, but from coordinated information warfare campaigns that exploit social media and democratic institutions. She paused, then continued with personal conviction. More importantly, it shows that standing up to bullies, whether they're high school classmates or foreign adversaries, requires courage, integrity, and institutional support. I faced the same harassment 20 years ago that I faced last week, but this time, I had the training, authority, and institutional backing to respond effectively. The hearing concluded with bipartisan support for Madison's conduct and universal condemnation of the criminal activities that had exploited personal conflicts for hostile purposes. Senator Brennan's closing statement summarized the committee's findings. General Torres, your testimony has revealed that what appeared to be personal drama was actually a case study in contemporary hybrid warfare. Foreign adversaries used personal conflicts, social media manipulation, and democratic institutions to attack American military credibility. Your professional response demonstrated exactly the kind of leadership we expect from our military officers. As Madison left the Capitol building, she was surrounded by journalists seeking additional comment. Agent Collins and Agent Murphy maintained their protective formation while she addressed the media briefly. The American people deserve military leaders who demonstrate integrity under pressure, Madison stated. Today's hearing confirmed that standing up to harassment and disinformation, whether from high school bullies or foreign adversaries, is part of defending democratic values. The media coverage that followed was dramatically different from the initial conspiracy theories and false narratives. Major news networks focused on the criminal charges against Ashley Chun and the foreign intelligence exploitation of social media conflicts. Jenny Walsh's attempts to maintain her victim narrative collapsed as evidence emerged of her coordination with Ashley to access classified information. Her social media following evaporated as supporters realized they'd been manipulated by someone pursuing personal revenge through criminal means. Derek Morrison faced professional consequences as his employer, a major corporation with government contracts, terminated him for association with activities that compromised national security. His attempt to humiliate a decorated military officer had destroyed his own career and reputation. 3 weeks after the reunion, Madison received a letter from Dr. Hawkins that captured the broader significance of what had transpired. Dear General Torres, I've watched your journey from a quiet teenager to a national leader with tremendous pride. What happened at the reunion and afterward wasn't really about high school, it was about character under pressure. You showed the same integrity at 42 that you displayed at 17, but now you had the strength and support to defend yourself effectively. Your former classmates learned that some people grow beyond their teenage limitations, while others remain trapped by them. Madison kept the letter in her Pentagon office as a reminder that personal growth often requires confronting the people and circumstances that once seemed insurmountable. The reunion had forced her to revisit old vulnerabilities, but it had also demonstrated how far she'd traveled from that lonely cafeteria table. 6 months later, Madison was promoted to the Joint Chiefs of Staff, becoming the youngest person ever appointed to that position. Her handling of the reunion controversy had been cited as evidence of her ability to maintain composure and integrity under complex pressures. Jenny Walsh, Derek Morrison, and Ashley Chun faced varying degrees of legal and professional consequences for their roles in what prosecutors described as a conspiracy to compromise military security for personal revenge. Their attempt to destroy Madison's career had instead elevated her to the highest levels of military leadership. The final irony wasn't lost on Madison. Former tormentors had inadvertently provided her with the platform to demonstrate exactly the qualities that made her worthy of leading American military forces. Their cruelty had been transformed into a crucible that revealed character rather than weakness. 20 years after leaving Lincoln High School feeling defeated and worthless, Madison Torres had returned as someone who could defend herself, her institution, and her country against any threat, whether it came from foreign adversaries or former classmates who'd never learned to grow beyond their teenage limitations. The quiet girl who'd once eaten lunch alone had become someone who could face down senators, foreign intelligence services, and social media mobs with equal composure. That transformation wasn't just personal success, it was proof that character, properly developed and institutionally supported, could triumph over any form of harassment or intimidation. The reunion had ended exactly as it should have, with truth prevailing over lies, integrity defeating cruelty, and justice protecting those who serve something larger than personal interest. Madison Torres had finally won the war that began in a high school cafeteria 20 years earlier. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hits the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.